I got to the site just after sunrise, when the air was still cold enough to sting my hands. The construction zone sat deep in the forest, far from any town, and mornings here always felt the same. The sound of distant engines warming up, the smell of wet soil, and the long shadow of the crane stretching over the clearing. I had been on this project for only a week, but the routine had already settled in. I signed the logbook, grabbed my thermos, and started to climb up the narrow ladder to the cab. Climbing always took a while. Step after step, metal rattling under my boots, the view opening wider with every meter. By the time I reached the cab, I could see the whole site. Scattered machinery, concrete foundations, and beyond them, endless trees. It looked peaceful from up here, almost quiet enough to forget how loud the ground could be. I slid into the seat, set down my thermos, and started my usual checks. Everything looked normal. Nothing moved except a few workers far below. I reached for the controller when something flickered in my peripheral vision. At first I thought it was just sunlight reflecting off the metal, but the movement came again, quick, deliberate. I leaned closer to the window, squinting along the length of the boom. A shape crawled toward me, stepping carefully between the cables. My first thought was that it had to be some kind of fox, maybe even a dog, but when it lifted its head, my stomach dropped. A lynx. A full-grown lynx, its fur bristling in the wind, and hanging from its mouth was a tiny kitten, limp and unmoving. I froze. She didn't. She kept walking straight toward the cab, slow but steady, as if the height meant nothing. When she reached the last few meters, she stopped and looked directly at me. Not panicked, not aggressive, just staring, her eyes locked on mine. I felt an unexpected wave of pressure in my chest, like she was trying to push a message across the glass. I shouldn't have opened the window. Every rule said not to, but something in that stare pulled me forward. I cracked it open just enough for air to slip through. The lynx stepped closer, still holding her kitten, and didn't flinch. She wasn't running. She wasn't confused. She had climbed all the way up here for a reason. Her gaze shifted, just for a moment, downward toward the tree line and the disturbed soil near the edge of the site. Then her eyes snapped back to mine. I felt my throat tighten. Something had happened down there. Something bad. I didn't know what I was supposed to understand, but I understood enough. I pushed back from the seat and grabbed the ladder railing. Leaving the cab without permission could get me pulled off the job, maybe worse, but I couldn't sit there pretending nothing was wrong while that animal waited for me. The lynx backed away along the boom, keeping her eyes on me until I stepped onto the ladder. The message couldn't have been clearer. She wanted me to follow. I climbed down faster than I should have, my hands slipping once on the cold metal rungs. When my boots hit the ground, the lynx was already waiting at the base of the crane, her tail twitching as if she feared losing me. She held the kitten firmly but gently, then turned and began moving toward the tree line. I followed her along the outer edge of the site, staying far enough back not to spook her, but close enough not to lose her. The machinery around us rumbled to life, but she ignored the noise, slipping between piles of lumber and stacks of rebar like she had done it before. When we reached the forest's edge, she stopped and set the kitten down for a moment. She looked back at me, checking whether I was still there, then continued forward. The ground changed quickly from flattened soil to the rough, torn up terrain left from yesterday's clearing. I remembered hearing the excavator working late, digging, turning the earth over, pushing debris to the side. Back then it sounded like progress. Now every patch of disturbed ground made my stomach clench tighter. About 20 steps in, the lynx slowed. She moved toward a mound of broken branches and churned dirt. She stood over it, ears flattened, chest rising and falling quickly. I knew what I was about to see even before I knelt beside the pile. The soil was loose, pushed up by the wide, flat edge of a bucket. Small tufts of fur clung to snapped roots. A faint musky scent clung to the air. This had been her den. I swallowed hard and brushed away some of the loose dirt. Underneath, something shifted. A tiny paw twitched weakly. I dug more carefully, and a second kitten emerged, half buried, its body pressed into the cold soil. Its breathing was shallow, barely more than a flicker. A few inches away, the third kitten lay on its side, eyes open but unfocused, not moving except for a tiny tremor. The lynx let out a low rumble, not a threat, more like a plea. She nudged the kitten she had brought from the crane closer to the others, arranging them, as if hoping the warmth would bring life back. I felt a rush of dread. I should have radioed my supervisor the second I stepped off the crane. I should have kept my distance. I should have followed protocol. Every rule drilled into me said the same thing. Report. Wait. Do not interfere. But none of those rules were written with a scene like this in mind. If I walked away now, I knew exactly what would happen. The machinery would start up again. The clearing crew would return. These kittens wouldn't stand a chance. The one buried in soil was already fading, breaths thin and irregular. The one lying beside it looked conscious but stunned, its small body too still. I pressed a hand against my thigh, forcing myself to think. If I called the office, they would shut down the area, eventually. But eventually might be too late for the tiny life struggling right in front of me. The buried kitten gasped once, a sharp, strained sound that jolted me like an electric shock. It wasn't going to make it much longer. I looked at the lynx. She looked back, her eyes full of panic she couldn't show any other way. If I didn't act now, one of her kittens would die before help even arrived. I ran back toward the parking area, my boots slipping on patches of loose soil. The air felt heavier with every step, like the whole forest was pressing in on me. When I reached my truck, I yanked open the door and grabbed the small first aid kit I kept under the seat. It was meant for people, not wildlife, but it had gloves, gauze, and a thermal blanket. Anything that might help keep the tiny creature alive a little longer. With the kit in hand, I hurried back to the clearing. The lynx was still there, crouched beside her kittens. She didn't hiss or growl when I approached. She just trembled, her ears low, her eyes fixed on the barely breathing one. I pulled on the gloves and knelt beside the mound. The soil was cold and compacted, and when I slid my hands beneath the tiny body, it felt limp, almost weightless. I tried to lift it slowly, giving the lynx time to understand what I was doing. She stepped closer, her breath quick and hot against my wrist, but she didn't interfere. Once I had the kitten free, I wrapped it lightly in the thermal blanket and checked its breathing again. Weak, but still there. The other two kittens watched with wide, unfocused eyes, their bodies trembling. They were in shock, but at least they were conscious. I knew I couldn't handle this alone. I pulled out my phone and dialed Cole, a local ranger I'd met years ago on another job. He picked up after a few rings, and I didn't waste time explaining everything, just the essentials. A lynx den destroyed, 3 kittens, 1 in critical condition. I needed help. Cole's voice tightened. He said he would come immediately, but he was at least 40 minutes away. The road to the site was rough, and he couldn't go any faster without risking his truck. 40 minutes. I didn't know if the tiny thing in my hands had even 10. I moved the kittens to a small shaded area near a cluster of young pines, farther from the torn-up ground, but still within sight of their mother. I set the weakest one in the warmest patch I could find and placed the others close for body heat. The lynx followed every movement, stepping so close I could feel the brush of her fur against my leg. Then, from the direction of the site, an engine roared to life. I felt the vibration through the ground a split second before the sound hit us. The excavator. Someone was starting work near the clearing again. The lynx jerked upright, fur puffing out, tail lashing. The kittens trembled harder, their small cries barely audible over the noise. I stood up fast, waving my arms toward the tree line where the machine was moving. No one could see me from here, but instinct made me try anyway. The engine grew louder, metal clanking as the bucket lifted. The lynx stepped between the sound and her kittens, her muscles tight, ready to bolt or fight. I knew I had to move quickly. I scooped up the blanket-wrapped kitten and stepped in front of her, trying to steady her with my presence, hoping she understood I wasn't abandoning them. Before I could think of what to do next, footsteps crunched behind me. Heavy, quick steps. I turned, still holding the fragile bundle. It was the foreman. He stopped short when he saw the kittens at my feet and the lynx standing only a few paces away. His face went red instantly, frustration overtaking the shock. He demanded an explanation, his voice loud enough to drown even the excavator for a moment. And I had no idea how to soften the truth he was about to hear. The foreman strode toward me, jaw tight, his boots kicking up clumps of dirt with every heavy step. He stopped a few feet away, glancing between the kittens, the lynx, and the blanket in my hands as if unable to process how all of this had unfolded in the span of a few minutes. His frustration hit like a wave, sharp and immediate. He told me I had no business being out here, that I was supposed to be in the cab doing my job, and that wildlife issues were not part of our work responsibilities. He jabbed a finger toward the crane and ordered me to get back before someone higher up noticed my absence and put both of us in trouble. I kept my voice steady, though it felt like my chest was tightening with every breath. I explained that I couldn't walk away, not with one of the kittens barely breathing and the others too stunned to move. He shook his head, insisting it wasn't our responsibility. They were wild animals, he said, and interfering could get the whole site flagged for violations, halting operations for days. Behind us, the excavator noise rumbled louder, the bucket clanking as it swung from side to side, adding another layer to the tension hanging over the clearing. The lynx stepped forward, placing herself between the foreman and her kittens, her body low and rigid, every muscle ready to spring. She didn't growl, but her tail lashed in sharp, nervous arcs, sending dust into the air. The foreman took a small but noticeable step back, muttering that the animal was dangerous and that we needed to clear the area immediately before someone got hurt. His voice cracked slightly despite the tough tone he tried to hold. I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could, a truck engine echoed from the road leading into the site. The sound carried over the machines, steady and growing closer. I turned toward the tree line just as Cole's old pickup rolled to a stop. The tires crunched over the gravel, and he stepped out quickly, his posture sharp, his expression tightening the moment he saw the excavator still moving and the lynx crouched near the roots. Cole approached us with deliberate, purposeful strides. The foreman tried to speak first, launching into a complaint about interference, liability, and the chain of command, but Cole lifted a hand to silence him. Without a word, he walked past us, inspecting the uprooted ground. He knelt by the broken branches and bits of overturned soil, lifting a handful of the disturbed dirt and letting it fall slowly through his fingers. He didn't need long to understand what had happened. His jaw tensed, and he stood slowly. He faced the foreman, his voice low but firm, each word carrying weight. He explained that the den had been here long before the clearing work began, and that the crew should have surveyed the area properly before running heavy machinery through it. Destroying an active den, he said, wasn't a small oversight. It was a violation that could cost the company far more than a delayed workday. The foreman's face shifted from anger to uncertainty. He looked down at the ground, then over at the excavator still idling in the distance, as if only now realizing the consequences of what had happened under his supervision. Cole continued, laying out the legal trouble the site could face, not to frighten him, but to make him understand that pretending nothing happened would only make everything worse. The foreman clenched his jaw, caught between frustration, defensiveness, and fear of the consequences he had overlooked. His confidence slipped, replaced by a hollow look that said he finally understood. Meanwhile, the weakest kitten let out a thin, strained sound, barely audible over the fading engine noise. I knelt beside it again, checking its breathing. Its body felt even colder than before, its tiny chest rising only slightly with each breath. I told Cole I needed to get the kitten warmed up right away. He nodded and stepped aside. The foreman didn't argue this time. He only looked away, rubbing the back of his neck like he was trying to erase the past hour entirely. I lifted the fragile bundle and headed toward my truck, the lynx following close behind, her steps hurried but unsure, torn between fear and trust. I placed the kitten inside the cab of the truck, wrapping it tighter in the blanket and turning on the heater. The warm air began to fill the small space, but even with the heater blasting, I could feel how weak the tiny body was, each breath more fragile than the last. Cole stepped beside me, his voice quieter now, almost solemn. He said the kitten might not survive the next few hours unless we acted immediately. Whatever decision we made, he warned, it couldn't wait until evening. The clock was already ticking. Cole checked the weakest kitten again through the open truck door, pressing 2 fingers gently against its tiny chest. He exhaled slowly, then looked toward the forest with a seriousness that made my stomach twist. He said we didn't have time to wait for backup or transport. The kitten's breathing was too shallow, too erratic. The best chance was to move them somewhere quiet and safe, far from the noise and vibration of the site. Somewhere close enough for the mother to accept, but sheltered from the cold and the constant disturbance of heavy machinery. The lynx paced in small, restless circles near the truck, her tail twitching like a loose cord ready to snap. She kept glancing toward the deeper woods, then back at her kittens, then at us, as if weighing the risk of trusting humans in a moment where she had no other choice. When Cole stepped back slowly and gave her a small nod, she finally turned and started walking toward the trees, stopping every few steps to make sure we followed. We gathered the kittens carefully. I carried the weakest one inside my jacket, keeping the thermal blanket snug around it to preserve what little warmth remained. Even through the layers, I could feel how fragile it was, light as a leaf, barely moving. Cole held the other two in a thicker towel he had pulled from his truck, their tiny bodies pressed together for shared heat. The lynx moved ahead of us, silent and alert, weaving through the undergrowth with practiced confidence, her ears flicking at every distant sound. After a few minutes, the ground rose slightly, and the trees grew taller, their branches forming a darker canopy overhead. The lynx led us along a narrow path toward an older part of the forest, where the underbrush grew thicker and the noise from the construction site faded into a distant, muffled hum. She stopped at a small hollow beneath the roots of a fallen pine, a natural shelter, barely visible unless you were looking for it. The earth around it was slightly packed, the entrance smoothed by age and use. Cole whispered that it must have been her previous den before she moved closer to the open clearing. We set the kittens down gently on a bed of dry needles inside the hollow, arranging them close enough for warmth but giving the mother space to move around them. The strongest two curled weakly toward each other, their bodies trembling in small, uneven rhythms. The smallest took longer to settle. Its breaths were shallow and uneven, the tiny chest barely lifting. I stayed kneeling beside it, unsure if moving it again would help or harm, afraid that even my breath might throw its fragile rhythm off balance. Cole crouched beside me and opened a small kit he had brought from his truck. He explained quietly that he had a mild stimulant suitable for tiny animals, something often used on injured fawns or weakened small predators. It wasn't a guarantee, but it might help the weakest kitten regulate its breathing. He drew a small amount into a dropper and waited for the lynx to step back. She didn't. She stood close, her muscles tight, but her posture not aggressive, just anxious, her eyes pinned to every small movement. Cole moved slowly, letting her see the dropper before bringing it down. When she didn't react, he placed a single drop on the kitten's tongue. The tiny body twitched once, then went still. A long second passed where I feared we had pushed it too far. Then the kitten's breathing steadied, still weak, but more rhythmic, more deliberate. Cole exhaled in relief and whispered that this was the best we could do, and that now the mother needed to take over. He told me to step away, to give the lynx space to reclaim her kittens. I backed up several paces, then more when she shifted her weight toward the hollow. She moved in immediately, placing her body around the kittens and pulling them close with gentle nudges of her muzzle. Watching her work, calm, instinctive, focused, hit me harder than I expected. There was a quiet determination in her movements, a certainty I envied. We stayed until she settled fully inside the hollow, her eyes just barely visible behind the tangle of roots. Cole said she knew what to do now and that interfering any further could cause more harm than help. We backed away slowly, giving her the space she needed. When we returned to the site, the foreman was waiting. His expression was different, not angry, not defensive, just subdued. He didn't say a word about punishment. Instead, he told me he had already spoken to the crew and wanted a full inspection protocol added before any clearing work continued. He didn't look happy, but he looked responsible, and in that moment, that was enough. I climbed back onto the crane that afternoon, my arms aching but my mind oddly steady. From the cab, I could see the edge of the forest where we had followed the lynx. The boom stretched out over the clearing like a reminder of how easily the land could be harmed when no one paid attention. The place looked the same as any other work site, but now I understood how much life could hide just beneath the surface. A week later, when my shift ended early, I drove past the tree line again. Near the edge of the woods, in a patch of golden evening light, I saw the lynx. This time, her 3 kittens were tumbling around her feet, unsteady but alive. They chased each other in slow, clumsy loops, never venturing far from her side. She looked at me for only a second before disappearing back into the brush. That second was enough. I knew I'd never forget the moment she had climbed out onto the crane, carrying a tiny life in her mouth, trusting me to follow, trusting me to understand. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss new stories. And now just click the playlist or the next video on your screen.